I went to Versailles for the first time.
Yes.
And we walked through the entire castle. And when we got out, I said, so what happened with the French Revolution thingy?
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Welcome to HILF History. I'd like to fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody. And my guest for this episode is Kristal Adams, a stand-up comedian here in Los Angeles who assigned me the subject of French literature. And then, a couple of weeks before we were scheduled to record, her car was stolen. Ah, shit, right? So she asked if we could record at her place, and I, of course, always come when requested. She said she had a great place in her house for us to record, very comfortable, very quiet, and indeed she did. Just wait until you hear where we end up. Before we jump in, however, I want to say thank you. Our last episode, the Radium Girls, smashed download records. Your support, shares, ratings, reviews, all that stuff are making a huge difference, and we really appreciate it. Follow us on Instagram at HILFpodcast to keep up and see what we've got cooking for the future. But first, a story from the annals of French literature that will remind you that giving head is not always a good thing. Let's get started. The picture of where I am right now is pure sex, truly. I am literally in bed with Kristal Adams. I am in the nest of love that she shares, I'm assuming, with your husband. I assume you share this one bed. I have all of my podcast stuff set up, and we made a fuck date. Yeah. I arrived at the appointed time for the fucking that we had prearranged.
Like right on time.
We walked right past her husband, straight into the bedroom, and now we are perched lovingly on the bed. You're half dressed. I'm mostly dressed for now, but we'll see. We'll see how things go. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks.
Not just in your house, but in your bed.
Yeah, in
this is
bed.
So gracious of you. I am with Kristal Adams. She is a stand-up comedian. Also, I looked into it. You are a consulting producer on Lego Masters.
Oh, I had done. Yes, I did that
God,
once.
I love that show. I love that show. What did you do for Lego Masters? What does a consulting producer do?
It's just a way for people that don't want to pay a lot of money, like shows that don't want to pay a lot of money, to hire writers without calling them writers.
Got it.
So yeah, and it was just like kind of like a one day thing, but it was very fun. And
Are you a Lego fan? Was that a prerequisite?
not at all. No, actually, it's a little. I'm like, do I share the sad thing?
Oh no. Okay, do it. We like we're already in bed. Let's get sad. It'll get us somewhere. We'll go up from here.
So I had actually previously worked on a TV show, and I just started talking about this on stage actually because I was working on a TV show as a writer and not Lego Masters on another one, and I got fired from it, and it's a bad show. Like, it's not a good show.
Oh.
And I think like that's what hurts the most, right? Is that when you get fired from writing on a bad show that is
Right.
bad already, it's
Right.
like it's like getting
I was
dumped by
better
an
than
ugly
this.
boyfriend.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
How dare you
leave me?
Yeah, look at your teeth. Your teeth left me. Okay. And then you are on Laugh After Dark. You have a set
Yes.
on Amazon Prime.
Yes.
Just for laughs. And I listened to your recent album, Ain't I a Wombat.
Oh, thank you.
Laughed out loud a lot.
Thank you.
Snorted. I think it's absolutely great. I encourage everybody to go listen to it. What am I missing? Are there any like credits that I'm overlooking or things in your introduction that you like to include?
I mean, my favorite job was working on The Circle at Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
So again, I was consulting producer, but it was the same situation. I was a writer.
Right.
And it was amazing. Like, I was flown to Manchester in the UK, and I got put up in a little apartment, and then every day I would come in and I would watch TV and talk shit about it and then write that down because they had to like weigh in on like, oh, do Americans get this joke? That's really why I was hired. It was like, they want to make sure Americans get the humor.
And you are the representative.
Yeah.
And a perfect representative.
But it was insane the amount of times where they would come back and be like, Americans never say this. And I'm like, I literally wrote it.
You said that you are leaving Los Angeles and heading to New York.
Yes.
When does this happen, and what is waiting for you there?
Hopefully, we are moving in January. And I think what is waiting for me really is just, I honestly don't know all the things, but when I am there, I feel creatively alive.
There you go.
And I feel like I have found people there that I could see and I would see on a real bit. See, the thing is that I have a lot of people here in LA that I like and love and would love to hang out with. The problem is we don't see each other.
Yeah.
Right? You have to get on somebody's schedule. My car was stolen,
Oh.
so then
Yeah.
it's just like difficult to get to places. And so I just really see that, like, especially without a car now, my life is going to be even smaller. Even if I can emotionally have the will, like put together the will to actually get out and make a plan to see somebody, my life has just quite naturally become smaller because I don't have the means to be able to visit people the way that I, in the amount that I would need in order to feel like I have real community. Whereas, I was in New York for 3 weeks and I saw one person like 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
And that could be like kind of a fluke, but it kind of just, the ease with which it happened felt really, it lifted my spirits to just be like, oh, if I had a friend in this area or in this area, it wouldn't be that difficult to go and meet up with them and hang out and just like spend like a few hours or a day just dicking around, whereas here it feels like, I don't know, like, could I just see where a day took me?
Yeah. Well, have you lived in a winter climate?
No, and that's
because what's going to happen is you're going to have this amazing idea, and you might go in the fall. And I've never lived in New York, but I have lived with seasons
yes.
that are unlike here, and nobody does shit between and you're moving in January, so
I'm doing it on purpose.
Well, and you know what? Maybe people in New York are different because it's more, they say, more walkable, and like, who knows, like whatever the condition of the subway is. But like, I'll tell you, in Minneapolis,
it's shut down.
It's shut. Because you got to think about, okay, I want to hang out with my friend. Love my friend. And goddamn, it's so dark and it's so cold, and I got to hang out with my buddy. And then you have to scrape the literal ice off the windshield of your car, let it warm up, go through this death trap of traffic in the city where some people know how to drive on ice and some people don't, and there's always a brand new crop of 16-year-olds any given winter that you have rolling around out there. Your hands, while you're waiting for it's so bad, the cold's so bad. So if you don't have a car, and you're going to the subway in that horse shit.
Yeah.
Girl, I hated the winter so much. I hated the winter so much.
But see, that's exactly why I'm going in the winter. That's why I want to go in the winter, because I want to rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay.
I've lived in Southern California my entire life.
Okay.
I don't want to have rose color, color glasses at all about the situation.
And when you say we and let's go, it is because you are not going alone. You are going with your husband.
Yes.
Fabrice,
yes.
Fabrice.
Yes.
It is in your set. I should know that because it's not Pine Sol. It is not.
It's not Febreze. Fabrice.
And actually, he is part of the inspiration for the subject of our HILF today, because I reached out to Kristal. I said, "Do you want to be a guest on my podcast?" She said, "Of course, come into my bedroom." And then we get to the subject, and you said that you wanted me to research French literature. And you said specifically it's because your husband is French. And you said I could ask him.
Yes.
But I don't want to do that. And I love that. And that has informed the manner in which I will be fucking this history for you, Kristal Adams. Because I just can't wait. Because and that we're in your bed makes this so much. I didn't know when I started the research that we would be sitting in your marital sheets as we discuss this. But in a way, I have been in your marital sheets from the very beginning. Tell me about your French husband. Tell me your love story. How did you meet?
We actually met on Tinder.
Oh la la.
Yeah.
Do you speak French? Are you a Francophile?
I am learning French.
Okay.
but not because I have a French husband. It's because I'm pretentious. And
That's why I actually speak a little French, and it is 100% because I'm pretentious.
Right?
How am I gonna fuck this French literature? Because French literature is a huge subject for one little old podcast, and I'd be glad to face dive Kristal Adams into anything that you asked me to dive into, but I thought that's too much to bite off. But because here's the deal, by doing the Three Musketeers, here's what I think I will give you.
Okay.
I'm hoping is a way to really like chew the fat around the fromage tray with your husband and perhaps any pretentious French friends he may have or that you may make along the way. Because by studying Three Musketeers, first we get French history and French Revolution history. And really what I found is the great French literature all touches back to the French Revolution. Until you really talk about the French Revolution, it's hard to get a grip on the literature part anyway. So what I'm going to do, my plan for the hilfing of this episode is we're going to start with the French Revolution. Then I'm going to talk about the author, Alexander Dumas. Once we've stripped him completely naked, we're going to jump in with the Three Musketeers.
Exciting.
Before we do you have any questions or anything in particular right off the bat that you want to know?
It's funny because I went to Versailles for the first time.
Yes.
And we walked through the entire castle.
Amazing.
And when we got out, I said, so what happened with the French Revolution thingy?
Are you serious?
I said it. I did. And I was serious.
And what did he say?
Does his
know?
credit.
Because all Americans don't know about the American Revolution. It's not.
Oh, they know. All
They
the
know.
French, they fucking know.
Okay, good. Well, you're going to know.
Yeah.
You're going to know. How did he answer you, though? I'm very curious.
He, kind of explained it, but he was like, you don't know? And I was like, no.
Well, oh my God, then this is going to be even more thrilling. You are about to really stick it to him. I'm telling you, your Trivial Pursuit nights are going to get a lot more lucrative for you. And at the beginning, I do have a gift for you. I got you your own copy of the Three Musketeers. It is in English.
Okay.
It's in English, I know. And then this copy, which you're welcome to borrow, is mine, which is English on one page, French on the other page.
That's dope.
It's such a fun story, too, and a great read. So, are you ready to fuck?
Oh, yeah.
The French Revolution. Okay. From the very beginning, the French Revolution is tied to the American Revolution. Okay. The French Revolution starts in 1789. That is the exact year we sign our Constitution. So we declared independence from Britain in 1776. But it takes fucking war, and then you gotta fucking do the thing. You gotta figure out how your government's gonna run, right? And all that shit. And as you may already know, the French are why we won. We could not have won the revolution without the French's help. And the French were fine. They liked Americans and the colonists fine, but really they wanted to stick it to the British. Because if there's anybody that the French really fucking hate, you may have ascertained this for yourself, it's the fucking Brits, right?
Yeah.
That was Joan of Arc's beef was with the Brits. It's just all the way down.
Okay.
So at the end, by 1789, it is King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. They were the ones who gave us all that money. They were the ones that Benjamin Franklin was like, this would be soupy great if you guys could send us some francs in a hurry and maybe some boats. And they did. And now they're tits deep in debt because it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't transactional. We weren't paying them allegiance.
Right.
We're not paying them taxes now. They just fought a big ass war just to stick it to a guy. And they were already broke. And they're out of money. I mean, out of money.
See, men are emotional.
Exactly. And Marie Antoinette, what the fuck? She's from Austria. She got married off to this boring ass French. She doesn't care. So they're still partying and living in this high affluent fashion. And the peasants are starting to get disgruntled. And the Enlightenment guys in bars are starting to be like, why is the system even like this? The Americans didn't do this. And there's a little bit of trouble. So King Louis XVI in 1789 is like, I smell trouble. I totally know what I'm going to do. I'm going to call together the Estates General. There's no parliament. There's no house. There's no voting. There's no House of Representatives. It's just the king and his council, whoever he wants to hear from. And he's like, I'm going to, though, call together. It hasn't been called in 175 years. The Estates General, which is representative from these three estates. So the way it's set up is the king is king is king is king. Then there's like a triangle of power. And at the top, you've got the clergy. They're the top estate, first estate. Second estate in the middle is the nobility, the like aristocracy. And that's like, the clergy is like 1,000-ish people. The second estate is like 100,000-ish people. And then the third estate is the peasantry, which is like 94 million people. Okay. And they have a few representatives from all of these to come and talk to the king, right? And like, why are we so broke? I don't even know. Like, this is crazy why we're so broke. And it's so obvious why we're broke, because you fucks can't stop spending money. And all you do is tax poor people to get the money back. Like, this isn't working. And in the midst of all this this is obvious. Everyone's looking at it like, we know why you're fucking broke. It's because you're fucking up. And so they'd be like, that's an interesting idea, but here's how we're going to figure this out, is we're going to have all three estates get one vote. So the king's going to like, essentially the king poses a question, how should we do this? And then everyone gets a vote. And the clergy and the aristocracy each get one. And the people, so they'd be like, I think we should raise taxes on poor people. And the clergy would say yes, and the aristocracy would say yes. So it's 2-1.
Right.
And it doesn't fucking work. So this fuckery, clear, this is months. This is all happens within 1789. They're like, absolutely, this is so dumb. So by then, the whole third estate, with the help of these enlightened individuals, which includes Lafayette, who was a huge help to us in the Revolution and the American Revolution, George Denton, and Robespierre, dun dun dun, he's kind of a bad guy, spoiler alert, get together the National Assembly, which is a whole new government. They're basically like, all right, never mind. We're going to, again, taking a line from those old American colonies. We're just our own government. The whole third, we're going to break off. And they go to meet in these meeting houses to like, what do we want? What are our terms? They get locked out of those buildings. So they go to a tennis court and meet there. They have the tennis court oath where they were like, we're not fucking leaving until the king listens to our fucking demands. And they start getting so, right? They start getting so like, that they are aware we're probably going to get fucking annihilated. Because you know what happens? At this part, like right when we start to make shit for the bat, they get us and they annihilate us. So we're going to anticipate that they're about to annihilate us, basically. And they storm the Bastille because that's where all the guns are. And where they're locking up some of our favorite guys, right? They go in and they cut a guy's head off, put his head on a spike, steal all these guns. Actually, the Bastilles are second stop because they got guns at another place where they killed a guy. And the Bastille is where they need the gunpowder, but this is bad, right? And at this point, the folks who are in this National Assembly, your Robespierre, your Danton, your Lafayette, are at a crossroads, which is like, are we violent, cutting people's heads off revolutionaries? Or are we, as the leaders of this, going to be like, no, that's not how we roll, right? And maybe they could have decided not to be violent in that moment. I'm not even sure, really, with the way that history unfolded, if they would have been able to be like, let's pump the brake, guys. Because that same October of 1789, 7,000 fucking women, hungry ass women who are like, this enlightened thing is so interesting. Bill of Rights, man, human rights is fascinating. I'm fucking hungry. My kids are fucking starving. We do not have enough bread. They're storing it in these places. All the rich people are eating fine. And they walk to Versailles. Okay, the place that you saw, because the king and the queen have been like, Paris is so grouchy, and they just went to Versailles to like get away from how gross things were getting. I'm not kidding. And the women knew it and were like, oh yeah, well, we're going. So they march to Versailles. They break in. Marie Antoinette escapes, tries to get the fuck out of there, and they get them both. They're not exactly prisoners, but they can't exactly leave. And they come back to Paris. And this is where King Louis XVI starts like, I'm sorry, super sorry. You guys are the best. No, I'm serious. I've always loved the revolutionaries. This is actually great. I've always been for this. And they start to slowly, the revolutionaries every week, every day, are like pulling like, don't wear these gorgeous clothes, take the crown off. They make him wear the red revolutionary hat. And he's publicly like, I really do think this is a wonderful idea. In the meantime, our man Joseph Guillotine has created an instrument of equality in execution. His whole point was, if people gotta die, they gotta die. We don't need to draw and quarter them. We don't need to hang them and watch their bodies twist and cheer while their eyes is but that's terrible. That's really horrible stuff. We just go, bam, everybody, whatever your class, whoever you are, whatever you're guilty of, if it's execution, boom, bam, painless, done. And lots and lots and lots of people are starting to get guillotined already. And at one point, the king and the queen are like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get the fuck out of Paris. And they try to escape. And here's how they do it, Kristal. Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, the richest people on the planet who've been bathed in diamonds since the instant they were born, pretend to be peasants. Get into a carriage and try to get out. I'm so poor. We're so poor.
So wait,
so they get
because
snatched.
nobody had carriages back then, or
Well,
like
yeah,
a thing
that was like phase one. They're like,
It's like,
we wore
we're
our
peasants,
grossest gowns.
but we hopped into a Ferrari to get away.
Exactly, because if we took the Bentley, they'd know. Shit gets crazy, okay? And the revolutionaries, when I say shit gets crazy, Lafayette and the founders of this violent wing of the National Assembly, immediately there's a division between them because it just gets so bloody and so nuts right away. Lafayette has to flee for a while, and Robespierre becomes this real dark character. One of the things they do in this early part of the revolution is abolish religion. Religion is illegal. It's part of the way that they get rid of the clergy. So they destroy most religious icons in almost every religious house. Then Robespierre creates the cult of reason and suggests that instead, like, they're replacing the atheistic religion with this age of reason, kind of Roman, kind of whatever, and they throw a festival of the cult of reason on June of 1794, and it becomes clear real quick that he goes from there's no God, he's just leaning real easy into like, or I'm God. It's like, we're not clear. Is it not God? Or maybe I'm God. In any event, I'll tell you what God wants. It's not important. Don't worry about it, right? At this point, we have gone through what's called the Reign of Terror, where they have guillotined, listen to this number, 40,000 people. 40,000. You got guillotined. If you were like, God, I just think it's kind of bloody and gross that we're killing so many people, you're questioning the revolution, you're guillotined. People are turning in their neighbors. I mean, it is a dark, dark, and really, really scary time. Shortly after the festival, this is in June of 1794, and by the festival, I mean he stands on a hill in this festival of the cult of reason, and everyone's like, shit. 1 month later in July, he goes to the General Assembly, the new government, and is like, I have a brand new list of people that are supposed to get guillotined, but I'm not even going to tell you guys who's on it yet because it's some of you. And they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to and they guillotine Robespierre. So
How long does that take before when he says it?
1794. So so a lot of people say the French Revolution started in 1789 and ends with the execution of Robespierre in 1794. That is absolutely not when the French Revolution ends. Because what we actually have is 3 more revolutions because it doesn't really calm down. You know what I mean? So, for example, Napoleon, who you've heard of him, right? Yeah. Little guy, very angry. He's actually average for his time, but that's not important. That he's remembered as small is significant. Napoleon comes up in the army during the French Revolution because in the middle of all of this super duper chaos in the city, which is 5-6 years of just like, God doesn't exist, the women are marching, there's heads everywhere, people are getting pulled out of prison, just burned in death, like crazy, crazy chaos. What we frankly fear when we look at the worst case scenarios, whenever people really start to rant and rave about the end of democracy and stuff, we're like, well, it's not like you're dragging people out of their homes and executing them for not voting for who you wanted. Oh, wait, that actually happens every once in a while, right? And so that's happening at home. And at the same time, get this, the French fucking declare war on Austria. Like, what? And it's in part because Marie Antoinette, but also because the European countries all around France are like, there's such a thing with monarchies. All these monarchies are being questioned. So all the monarchies and all these little countries are like, fuck no. We got to put this down, if only because we got to maintain the general rule of order here in Europe, right? So they start these wars with Austria and France, and Austria and Spain and Portugal and Britain and Germany, always, right, Britain. And Napoleon is this fucking amazing general who is kicking ass, winning unbelievable, against all odds. He's like the George Washington of France because he's low-born. He didn't have a ton of experience. His father is a nobody. And just by being that great and being this good at war, he is saving his country and proving individualism and all of these amazing things that the revolution is all about. He, at one point, is out on the battlefield doing his thing. And he's like, by the way, what the fuck is going on with the revolution at home? Like, how is that going with all the stuff? And he's brought like 6 months worth of newspapers or news, the equivalent of the newspapers, to read, and he reads them all in one night and is like, I gotta go back to Paris right now. Oh my God. So Napoleon basically goes back to Paris and like exploits the fact that there is no one at the helm. And arguably, depending on who's telling you the history, they needed somebody to come crack some skulls. Because every time somebody kind of came to power, guillotine them, just wanting power meant you had... And then there's divisions, there's the war. There were a bunch of people that were in the royal army that defected immediately to go over to the National Guard. And then they split in half and like they'd fire on each other. It was chaos, complete chaos. So Napoleon comes in and is like, I know exactly what to do. I'll be emperor. And easy. And that was it. I mean, it was a little more complicated than that, but for our purposes, that's what happened. He started off first consul for life and then was like, or emperor, I'll be emperor. But he still goes out and continues to do war. And here's what's going on in America. He is the one who legislates the Louisiana Purchase. So Thomas Jefferson is now president in the United States of America. We have gone from George Washington to John Adams down to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson is looking west, and he has purchased most of the land in the United States from our buddy Napoleon at this point. And Napoleon does it because they are out of fucking money again.
Merde.
So now France is a little bit calmed down at home. The war is out here, and Napoleon continues to kick ass at war, and the Europeans come after him. It is Russia, Prussia, Austria, the UK, Sweden, Spain, and Portugal, in various configurations at various times, send 6 different like missions to get Napoleon. 1 fails, 2, 3, 4, all fail. 5 fails. Finally, the 6th one, they defeat Napoleon's army. He's unpopular at home. There's already a hot fucking bed ready to... we love devouring fucking leaders. And he gets exiled to a place called Elba, which is an island in the Mediterranean. And it's a sad little island, and he's there for a while, right? Do you know what happens next? I'm very curious, because this is like one of my favorite little HILF nuggets of all time. Most people know Napoleon was exiled.
Yes.
But do you know what happened after he was exiled to Elba?
I don't remember, but I think at some point somebody must have told me, because it's what you're saying is starting to sound familiar to me. Yeah. I don't know what happens next.
Okay, buckle up. Not only does Napoleon escape, he like sneaks onto some little boat that had pulled up for some reason. There was some bribe, who knows, right? He escapes. He gets back to France on this boat, finds his army, like a huge group of his soldiers, and is like, hey guys. And they're like, fucking A, it's Napoleon. And his soldiers love him. And one of the reasons his soldiers love him is because he's one of them. He's not one of these aristocratic dickheads. And he does things like say, go ahead and loot and pillage. We don't have any money. We're not feeding you. So when you take over a place, take whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Soldiers love that stuff, right? So they see him and they're like, it's our guy. And he's like, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Getting the band back together. They get back to France. Kristal, he is reinstated for 100 days. And goes back to war with Europe. I mean, unbelievable that even that Paris was like, we are so glad you're back. None of us had anything to do with anything. But you're not apparently mad at us. You're really still with this beef with Europe. He goes and he loses in the Battle of Waterloo. Is exiled again. This time he is sent out to the island of St. Helena, which is in the middle of fucking nowhere. Very cold. Can't get out. And he pretty much plays cards and bitches until he dies at the age of 51 in 1821.
That's so sad.
It is kind of so sad. Any questions about the French Revolution stuff? I feel like that gives us our baseline for what we need to know to really get the panties off of the Musketeers.
I mean, I didn't know about the women like marching. I didn't realize it was like a bunch of women. And
Napoleon kind of screwed the women over, actually, because there were some incredibly progressive movements in the French Revolution they put into their documents and made sort of fundamental. And one of them was an incredible amount of rights that were newly appointed to women, including hereditary, like ownership rights. And Napoleon took a lot of that away when he got the throne. He was good for religious freedom. He was like, there's no state religion, but there's also no persecution. You can worship, so it's good for the Jews, bad for the women. You win some, you lose some.
You ditched Napoleon?
The next part of our hilfing is the author of The Three Musketeers, Alexandre Dumas. Do you know anything about him?
I know that he is part black.
Yes, he is. He's 1/4 black.
Yeah.
And that's why we actually start with his dad. Because his dad is Thomas Alexander Dumas. And he's tits deep in all this stuff that we just talked about.
Okay.
So Alexander Dumas' dad was born the son of a white French nobleman and his enslaved woman. Her name is Marie Celeste Dumas on the island of Haiti. The laws in France at the time is they had abolished slavery. Haiti, not only was slavery legal, but the son of a slave, however the paternal was an enslaved person also. So Alexander Dumas' dad takes him back to France when he's about 5 years old. And it is this crazy fuckery of like, because his dad was also broke. And so it was like, he was a noble, he was a marquis, but his estate was not secure. And he had some beef with his brothers. So he like legally sold Thomas Alexander Dumas, his half-black son, to another passenger on this boat, which paid his fare. And then when they got to France, he purchased him back.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Then they get to Paris, and he enrolls him in military school and tries to give him a particularly French noble upbringing to the extent that he could, being half-black. And he does fairly well, and he excels really well in this military school. But when it comes time to enlist in the actual army, even though he has a noble name, he cannot get into an enlistment because he's half black. So the only way for him, he could get to that level, but he'd have to be promoted from a private. And at this point, his father says, I can't have our name as a private in the military. So that is when he takes his enslaved mother's name, Dumas. He also has a falling out with his father. I scoured, man, to try to figure out what happened, but about the time he takes his mother's name, he also cuts off contact with his father. He doesn't really take any of the benefits of his father's nobility after that. I don't know how much was available, but he doesn't benefit. The rest of his life, everything he gets is from his military service. He is the first, they call him Afro-Antilles as his genealogy, to reach the level of general in the French military. He just kicks ass. He ends up fighting along with Napoleon. And do you remember when I told you that Napoleon told his army to loot and pillage?
Yeah.
That was the first time that Thomas Alexander Dumas stepped up to Napoleon and said, I don't think that we should be doing this. First of all, it's technically illegal. Like, technically, we're not supposed to do it. But also, it doesn't live up to the tenets of the revolution, which are equality. And these people are technically upper class. And Napoleon not only didn't like hearing no, but he ended up writing him out of a number of successes that he was a part of in some of these campaigns, including, glorious artwork that he, Thomas Alexander Dumas, was the hero of, that they would paint with someone else of white skin and just sort of write him out of the history altogether. It gets worse. He eventually, in one of his campaigns, gets captured and imprisoned. And Napoleon does nothing to release him. And he is basically imprisoned for like 2 years on this horrible island. He goes blind in one eye. He's completely malnourished. His body starts to get deformed. Then, in 1803, when Napoleon is now emperor and they win, he is released and he goes home and marries an innkeeper's daughter and has 3 kids. But Napoleon denies him his military pension. So his children are born into poverty. Alexander Dumas is 3 years old when his father dies. And his mother raises him with the stories of his father's legendary status. And he goes out and sees his dad is somebody out there in the world and people cared, but he's so broke, right? He can't do the thing. So his skill is in writing. And one of the things he has is exceptional handwriting. So he goes to Paris and becomes a scribe for somebody. Eventually writes his first novel and he sells only 4 copies. Now, here's one of the things that is dominating for Alexander Dumas' life story, and it permeates in and out of all this stuff, is his inadequacy. His dad was this guy. He was the hero of battles. He was the hero of France. He stood up to Napoleon, and Alexander Dumas, is just a writer. It is part of his tortured, writer mentality, you know what I mean? Tortured artist thing throughout. And he wants to be huge. And eventually he gets big by writing plays. He starts looking through the pages of history, and he's got a buddy who is helping him write a lot of various things. And they basically find a great historical tale and then make it up. And then flip it on its head, make up the characters and kind of keep it semi-appropriate. And he writes this play called Christine and Henry III. And they're huge. He meets Victor Hugo. He's meeting these other huge French writers, and he becomes rich. He gets a ton of money, and he starts to make proper money. And he gets sponsored by a guy named the Duke of Orleans, who is related to royalty, definitely a rich guy, gonna keep him rolling in loot. And in 1832, there is another fucking revolution. And all of a sudden, the guy who's sponsoring Alexander Dumas, the Duke of Orleans, becomes king. He's now Louis Philippe I.
Oh, wow.
And Alexander Dumas is in a bit of a fucking bind because his dad is a hardcore Republican. And Republicans don't do kings. And now he's working for a king. And the revolutionaries are like, you can't, we are anti-monarchists, and your father, and what is he going to do, right? So he participates in some revolutionary acts against Louis Philippe I and ends up hiding, runs off to Austria for a while and hides for a while and in Italy, and is afraid that he's going to be arrested and thrown in jail by the king. And what happens is the July monarchy, this Louis Philippe I's reign, they come down hard on the revolutionaries and then forgive everybody. You know what I mean? Basically are absolutely not. It's not fucking happening again. And then, but it's not that big of a deal. Trying not to breed more enemies. So Alexander Dumas comes back to Paris, and it's kind of a bummer. He was about to be truly persecuted in a way that he kind of wanted to be persecuted for politics, and he just got welcomed back. But he found out he can write travel. He wrote about his travels, so he's making money with that kind of stuff. And even though he should have a ton of money, Alexander Dumas also has at least 4 illegitimate children and minimum of 40 mistresses. And this is a generous, but I mean, it is crazy when you start looking through the historical documents of this stuff, and they're let's see, there were 12 20-something actresses, and then there were 4 hotel managers, and then there was also a screen. I mean, he was just everybody all the time, and he would buy a house, and it would just be Fucktown, and everyone would come to Fucktown and eat all of his food, and then he would pay all the bills, and then run out of money, and he was supporting all of these kids, and so he could never quite keep money.
Nick Cannon of
Absolutely, 100%. Ooh la la. Alexander Dumas, at the end of his life, he's very sad. He wants to get involved in something that will matter. And so he comes back to Paris and he tries to get involved in the then National Assembly, another sort of revolutionary government opportunity. And at this point, it has become even more racist than it was when his father was elevated to the level of general. And he cannot believe how limited. He is rich. He is famous. He's lost some of his money, but his name is still everywhere. And he would go into the meeting house where as you present yourself as a potential nominee, and they would chant "Ho, ho, Negro" until he left. I mean, it was not even polite French. It was very overt, and it was dominating. So he removed himself and thought he was something of a failure for that reason. Mm-hmm. He, one of the most exciting things that I found was that he was also into drugs. He was in a monthly drug club that included Victor Hugo and other French writers of the time.
A drug of the month club?
It was once a month. They called themselves the Hashishans.
Oh, no.
And they met once a month at a hotel in Paris and just got weird.
I love the honestly, the fact that they've combined drugs with being on time and at a place somewhere once a month, like it's so responsible at the same, you know what I mean? Like
It is. It's like a book club, only when you open the book, it's just drugs in there.
It's definitely a writer's drug club.
It is. But they said like these trays out with like various ways to consume. You could smoke it, you could eat it. It's very exciting.
I love it.
I know, me too. Sadly, our guy dies fairly young in 1870 at the age of 68. He had been living rent-free by necessity with his son for the last 10 years of his life. Wow. And one of the last things that he said was, I hope I am remembered for something. And it is true that all for one and one for all is something that has certainly outlived any of the names of any of the revolutionaries that he was hanging out with at the time.
This is just, it's so fascinating. And I just also went to the Victor Hugo Museum. So this is so nice.
Okay, well, I'm going to crawl up into bed here and cuddle up with your pillow, and then we'll be back for part 2.
Hi there, I'm Laurel.
And I'm Katie.
Two sisters who love talking about history, and we are the hosts of Hightailing Through History.
In each episode, we surprise each other with a story about the unknown or unusual bits of history that make the past a goldmine of fun.
A Chinese sex worker turned pirate queen who had the largest fleet in history.
How one of the world's greatest generals was defeated by an army of rabbits. And what real-life person inspired the Mortal Kombat character Scorpion. In addition to hightailing through different people, places, and events in history, we are also telling our tales. Hi, Laurel, our resident stoner, but I prefer boozing.
But you don't have to enjoy those things to enjoy our podcast. We've staged you a seat in our smoke circle. Come relax, have a laugh, and enjoy history's weird and wonderful moments as we hightail through history.
That's Hightailing Through History. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Have an anecdote about Marie Antoinette? Did I omit something critical? Maybe you have a question about a source or a guest. Well, let me know. You can email the show, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or find us on Instagram @hilfpodcast. And while you're there...
Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
We are back. Normally, when I have people over to my house, I'm always like plying them with booze and cannabis, and I feel like I should just be bringing people into my bed. And that's what we're trying to get to. It's just like a chill vibe. Like I should have been doing this from the very beginning. So we're going in on these Musketeers. So here's what I want to know from you. What do you know already about the story, the characters? What do you have on these guys?
So I did watch the movie from the 90s.
Okay, I was gonna. So there's been gazillions of these movies.
Yeah, there are.
There's the 1940s with Gene Kelly.
Absolutely not.
1970s with Michael York.
No.
And the 1990s with Chris O'Donnell.
Yes, the 1990s one for sure. Watch that one. And then also, I think, because don't they also appear in Man in the Iron Mask or no?
You know, I didn't do as much research. It is all in that same time frame. Same thing with like the Count of Monte Cristo has to do with like revolutionaries. But
Yes.
I you know what? That's a good question. I don't know if D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Artemis show up.
They show up in another one because I remember watching. I think it might have been Man in the Iron Mask because I remember watching it.
Did the one with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I remember being like, he's so cute. We're going to put him in this thing. We're going to put him in this mask. Like, wow. That's okay. But
And I there's part of me that thinks that I might have even read it, like just to be like a nerd and be like, I also read it. Like,
Les Trois Musketeers.
but I for sure don't remember any.
Yeah. Well, it's good.
And I don't know
it's
the history of.
I do recommend it. It's a really fun book to read. But it is a historical fiction. So it is wordy and long and flowery and colorful, but you know, what the fuck? If you're taking a bunch of you're going to be on the bus a lot. You know, you're going to be in the back of an Uber now.
Yeah.
You don't got a car. So you're going to need that. I imagine the subways of New York are a great place to read
Yes.
The Three Musketeers. We learned about the French Revolution. We learned about our guy, Alexandre Dumas. So he writes The Three Musketeers in 1844. We're entering a new revolution, which is the Industrial Revolution. The fact is the world has changed. So whether or not Europe is going to be able to hold on to their monarchies or not, we've got steam engines coming, literally right for your front door. And in 1844, in the United States, we have westward expansion. James K. Polk, episode 4 of HILF. He's the one with the mullet. James K. Polk is president, and he starts heading west. The railroad starts going west. We get all the way to California, and the Mexican-American War is ending. So we got cowboys all up in this business. So this is when he's writing The Three Musketeers, and it's set in 1625. So it is sort of like right now an author setting their story in 1776 because it can speak to right now. Yeah. So there's always a reason you set your historical fiction when you do. Like The Crucible, which is about the Salem witch trials in the 1950s when we had the Red Scare and McCarthyism and everyone's hunting down communists, right? There was a reason why we had to go a few hundred years back to tell a story that was going to speak so much to like what's going on right now, because we can't hear, if you start saying Republican and Democrat, everyone's going to shut down because we're too in that right now. But if you start talking about Jefferson and Hamilton, maybe I can listen for a minute before I duck out. So The Three Musketeers takes place before Louis XVI. It's still the ancient regime, so it's still that like the three estates and like the old school pre-revolution life. And it's not necessarily that's romanticized. It's what makes The Three Musketeers, I think, given like what we've already learned about the revolution, it just puts it in such technicolor for us. So here's the quick plot, all right, of The Three Musketeers, just to get your arms around it. We've got our characters, D'Artagnan. He's the lead. He's Chris O'Donnell, okay? And then you've got Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. They are the Three Musketeers. I believe in the 90s version, Kiefer Sutherland is our Athos. I think Jeremy Irons is Artemis.
Was there a black one?
And Platt, Oliver Platt. No, I don't think they didn't have a black one in the 90s. They weren't ready. We just got good with dinosaurs, okay? We brought dinosaurs back to life. We're not that progressive yet. So we've got, so these are the Three Musketeers. Athos is a little older. He's sad. He's a drunk. He has a dark past. Porthos is the funny, dandy Oliver Platt. Artemis is clergy, kind of a low-ranking member of the clergy, and a womanizer, Jeremy Irons. What they don't usually put in any of the movie versions, but is in the book, is that all of the Three Musketeers have servants.
Okay.
That have really interesting personalities and interact with this story in kind of clever and interesting ways, but they don't, I haven't seen any movie versions that include all the servants. D'Artagnan is this poor kid from Gascony in the middle of nowhere. His dad is poor but proud, you know, and he's been given this humble, and his dad says, go to Paris, right? It's time to go to Paris, do something with your life. Here's a sword, here's a horse, and here's a letter for the guy who runs the Musketeers, introducing yourself, because this guy who runs the Musketeers, the king's important guard, the king's best army, right? He's just like you. He's a poor guy from the middle of nowhere. We used to know each other. So you bring this letter from me, you introduce yourself, you're going to do great. And remember, don't take shit from anybody. You're just as good as anybody else, all right? So D'Artagnan's like, you got it. He's like, and he says specifically, if anyone says shit, you start a duel, even though duels are technically made illegal at this particular time. So D'Artagnan heads to Paris, and on his way, crazy encounters. He meets these three individual guys on three individual places. They all slight him in some way that offends him deeply. He challenges them to a duel. And these duels, by the way, are to the death. Right? The idea is he's not going to... And it makes one for, various times throughout the day, all in this one park. And he's like, oh my God, I'm fucking up. But I have to stand up to my name. So he goes to the park to meet for the first duel, and it is with Athos, and Athos has as his seconds these other two musketeers. And they're like, you can't fight this guy, we're gonna fight this guy. We all have duels with this name, this is crazy. And right when they're about to start their duel, the Cardinal Richelieu's evil guards come to stop it. And they're all like, all for one, one for all. D'Artagnan fights alongside the Three Musketeers against Richelieu's guards. From here on out, we have this fantastic adventure story that involves the king, who's sort of a funny, ineffective monarch, which is important, as you can imagine, in 1844. If you're going to write a story about the king that happened before the Revolution, he can't be great, right? Mm-hmm. And his wife, Queen Anne, is having an affair with the Duke of Buckingham, who's English. Oh,
okay.
Intrigue. Okay. Then you have the Cardinal Richelieu, who's a bad guy. Easy to make fun of the church. There is nothing wrong with saying that priests and members of the clergy are bad. But they can't necessarily make him the ultimate villain because of things that are stirring in 1844. So what you end up getting is just this really dope story with these really believable characters. Everyone's great. Everyone's flawed. The Musketeers are alcoholism. They're womanizers. They're flawed characters. They're bad. They steal sometimes, but they're always super loyal friends, right? The king does some good things and helps the Musketeers out and does some maneuvering to get them what they want, but he can't be trusted, and they are screwing him over and hiding his wife's affair, and it's just great. And it was printed originally as this serial that would come out every week in these newspapers, and people completely loved it. There's also a ton of sex. Constance, who is like the ingenue that D'Artagnan falls in love with, is a married woman in the books. Almost all of the movies make her a young, single ingenue, and the man involved in her life is like her uncle or her dad or some other way to make it. Because even Dumas was like, nah, cheating on your wife is not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Infidelity does not a bad guy make. So they continue, they go back and forth. The three Musketeers fight for each other. They split at some point. They all get separated. It's very exciting. There's a villainess named Milady de Winter who is working with Cardinal Richelieu to try to disgrace the king and consolidate his power and create a war. And it turns out she is the evil ex-wife of none other than Athos, the dark, sad, drunk musketeer, and he's tortured by her. And then D'Artagnan kind of falls for her, Milady de Winter, and then he cheats on Constance with Milady de Winter, but then Milady de Winter kills Constance to get back at D'Artagnan, but then Milady de Winter is executed, and all of the Musketeers go back to the court, and the Cardinal and the King do some very that's how it is, isn't it? And then and then they all are sort of disbanded to a life happily ever after. Alexandre Dumas does write a sequel. So none of them die at the end. So if you want to follow their exploits, there are further stories. But that is generally the Three Musketeers. And among the reasons people loved it is because they're also flawed. So believable. It's intrigue, it's sex, it's chivalry, it is swashbuckling. Like, what's not to like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's the kind of thing where it is a job, much like his father, where somebody who is of nothing could become something. Mm-hmm. And so I understand that makes sense why it would have such mass appeal, because people who are of upper class, they probably know people that are, came from nothing, but that's how they got their status. And then there's people who aspire to be that, who they aspire to move up the way that these people have moved up. And so it's really fascinating. And I wonder what the equivalent is for us now of that role, or that thing where it's like you are still an everyday person somehow, but you have the respect of the upper classes because of this thing that you do. I don't know that we have a specific equivalent.
Either. I mean, I think that we like to tell each other that it's still veterans. But I think that we can just look around and point to the real life reality for veterans and see that they are not elevated and celebrated and supported in really consistent and tangible ways. I don't know. Fire, we do all this token stuff for these emergency workers. Yeah, I don't know. But I do think that hero story of coming from nothing does still really resonate with people, and a lot of times people are trying to emulate that. People who do definitely come from something like to kind of pull up some fake bootstraps that their dad gave them.
Oh, yeah.
That they were able to pull up their dad's bootstrap.
There's a lot of... yeah.
But I also think that one of the interesting things about what Dumas does too is because you saw the way the revolution turned and turned and turned. So, the Third Estate is the response to the monarchy. Then the Third Estate splits the National Assembly. Then Lafayette's got to go. The people who were guillotined by the guillotine included King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, Mr. Guillotine, Robespierre, George Denton. Most of the people who founded the Jacobins, this like violent wing, were all guillotined. It was this like just really, and then you would have, no, the king is good. No kings can possibly be good. But then Napoleon was great in part because he came from nothing. So here's a story of somebody who came from nothing and was our hero for a minute and is now a disgrace or at least feckless. Even if we loved him, he was defeated and is living and died at 51 on an island, a defeated guy, So and the same thing with the church. There were like some really, really terrible cardinals who like coordinated to execute and infiltrate and align with all of these evil sources. And then they would have these stories of these heroic priests who would save and hide and persevere through these. I mean, there was just no such thing as an iconic good guy, which is why something like this could happen. A story like the Three Musketeers could happen. But it does bring us to Victor Hugo, because I want to just super quickly before we go, there's two other French literature icons that I have to mention in your bed.
Yes.
With your French marital sheets. So Victor Hugo, we talked about a little bit. He wrote Les Miserables, which is a fantastic book, a great musical, and an okay movie. Have you seen the play and/or the movie?
I've actually read the book. I have seen several movie versions. Because there are multiple. I've actually seen 3. I'm positive that I've seen 3 movie versions of Les Mis.
So you're a fan.
I'm a fan of Les Mis specifically,
Yeah.
and probably. I mean, I did read Hunchback, so. But those are the only 2 things that I, that I knew about French literature at all. And I have seen the live musical, which is phenomenal. In fact, at the end of the Victor Hugo Museum tour, they had like a statue of, I think, Eponine, and I just did a video and I was like, and my husband was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah.
I like to know there is. So I can't sing. I'm not a singer, but I love musicals and I love acting.
Too.
And it was so hard for me to realize that like that was not my lane. I was gonna have to be funny because I also wasn't hot. I'm like, oh no, you're not hot and you can't sing, girl. You gotta think of something quick or you're gonna have to get a job like everybody else. But I saw Les Mis on a touring production in St. Paul, Minnesota, when I was in middle school, and it's definitely why I'm an actor. Because I was like, girl, I am ready to fight and die for France.
Yes, right? And I think it's so funny is that even seeing that, I think what's funny is that in both of us, and me, it launched a desire to be on the stage, but not a desire personally to learn more about France.
No, you know what's so nuts? I'm telling you, middle school, you know me. I love history. I fuck history, girl. Even when no one has a microphone in my face, I am fucking history all the time. I can't stop. I am an actor because of Les Mis. And it took you in this episode for me to dig into the French Revolution. Why? Why?
C'est très bon. It's very good.
And it's so fascinating because get this. Okay, so now you know you love Les Mis. Okay, so it is written about the revolution that took place in 1832. This is the one that was King Charles X. He's like, French Revolution happened and Napoleon happened. He comes back and is basically starts off okay. Does like, frankly, a tour. It's like everybody. Kings aren't so bad. Kings aren't so bad. And then comes back to Paris and is like, I'm just going to super quick write out all of the progressive laws that were made during the French Revolution. It's called the Four Ordinances. And it is what gets the people to rise up and try to depose him, including our guy, Alexander Dumas. And so you have this story starts that Victor Hugo writes. I think he wrote it in 1834. And most of the stuff that he included in Les Mis, he observed on the streets of Paris. He saw, for example, a woman cutting her own hair and desperately trying to sell it. He saw a man fight violently to steal a piece of bread. And he would sort of write these things down as he went. And of course, he wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which also epitomizes a lot of that good, bad, church, peasant relationship. But that also was all about love. Victor Hugo, at the end of the day, love of child, romantic love, patriotic love, love of country, fraternité. Okay, which brings us to the last of our guys that I'm going to tell you about. Which is so perfect that we are just still snuggled up here in your bed. And that would be the Marquis de Sade.
Okay.
What do you know about him?
Nothing.
So he is right about the same time, a little bit later. He lived until 1814. So he died right about the time that Napoleon was permanently exiled. And he is where we get the word sadist from, the Marquis de Sade, because he was a sexual sadist. It wasn't just that he was because like you kind of think, France in the 1800s, like if you like a finger in your butt, does that make you like the worst? Like how far are our sexual proclivities here? But he would like entrap people in his house and force them to perform sexual acts for days. And he enjoyed beating people and inflicting pain. And he was all over the place. He also believed that prostitution should not only be legal, but paid for by the state.
Oh my God.
So as to like alleviate people's lustful intentions. He at some point, because he was sort of elevated, he's a marquis, he was born with money, he came from a wealthy family. At one point, he hired a prostitute and kept her trapped in his house and asked her to do so many unspeakable things that when she was finally released, she got him arrested, which, you can probably imagine how bad something has to be for a prostitute to go to the authorities in France and tell them a marquis is a psycho. Yeah. They had to be like, that's real. Like, that'd be really bad. They arrest him, and he is imprisoned many, many times over the course of his life for various durations in various places. Sometimes prisons, sometimes mental institutions. He was imprisoned for blasphemy, perversion, and one of the institutions in which he was incarcerated for a while, called the Charenton Asylum. And this is, the craziest of crazies. And they were sort of trying to like, yeah, you're in prison, but it doesn't have to be that bad. So they would allow him to write and perform plays within the asylum with the inmates as his cast. This happened over various periods of time. Eventually, new rulers in charge are like, similar to our prisons, and like, prison can't be this great. Like, that sounds too awesome. And it sounds like he's probably having a blast. So he has to go into solitary confinement for a while. The craziest thing is he, in 1790, gets out of an institution long enough to serve on the National Convention.
Oh my God.
Because like, we are so open-minded. You have no idea how open-minded we are. And then they were like, not that open-minded. And he got incarcerated. Again, if you really want to get in on the Marquis, and who doesn't, there is a fantastic play called The Persecution and Assassination of Jean-Paul Marat, as performed by the inmates of the Asylum of Sheraton under direction of the Marquis de Sade. That's the name of the play. It was written in 1963 by a German guy, surprise, named Peter Weiss. It's been on Broadway. It's a Tony winner. It's very cool. It's very weird. It's a play within a play. So it does take place in this insane asylum, but it's sort of like the guards are telling the inmates what to perform, and it's sort of like they're trying to get to you. They're trying to overcome the censors and tell you, the audience, what actually happened. But they're being overridden. It's very cool. It's very trippy. It was exactly what people wanted to see in 1963. And the title, as I said, is The Assassination of Jean-Paul Marat. And this is the story that I'm going to leave you with before I exit your sheets. At the start of the revolution, when they first go into the Bastille, cut off the first head, stick it on the first pike, and are like, is this what we're doing? And there was a little debate. The person who was writing the most fervently about, yeah, girl, this is exactly how we need to do this, was a guy named Jean-Paul Marat. He was an intellectual. He was into the Enlightenment. He was into the Revolution. But he also had this crippling skin disease that meant he had to soak in a salt bath for hours and hours a day. And his head was always sort of wrapped. And he was sort of a freaky dude, right? And he would write these messages, these letters and these essays that were like, more blood, more murder. It's the only way they're ever going to listen to us. And he was, and it was, his stuff was like the most read stuff in Paris, even though he's just this freaky little angry guy sitting in this bath by himself. At one point, a woman from out in the country kind of sees this whole thing going down and is like, this guy's the problem. This guy is the one who's making everybody so nuts. I know exactly what to do. Her name is Clara. So she heads to Paris and she says, I have a list of enemies, all of whom should be exposed and sent to the guillotine, but I'll only show it to you. And he goes, great, right? Right? The more the merrier. So she is permitted into his room where he's sitting in the bath. And she stabs him in the fucking neck.
Oh my God.
Him. And then she is sent to the guillotine. And it'd be great if you'd said that and then that stopped the murders, but that murder doesn't generally stop murders.
One other thing that happened, which I think precipitated my question about French literature, is so one day my husband and my stepdaughter were around the table and they were repeating a rhyme. They were repeating a rhyme in French. And I was like, what's that? And so they translated it to me. And it was essentially the tortoise and the hare. Mm. And I was like, oh, Aesop's Fables. And they're like, no. And then they said this name. I forget the name. We probably should look it up so that people know. Uh-huh. They're like, no, that's such and such. I go, well, okay, well, maybe he put it into a rhyme. But the tortoise and the hare is an Aesop fable.
It's as old as they get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they go, what? And then so I look it up and I show them. They're like, whoa. And there was like several Aesop's Fables that at some point had been turned into French rhymes for school children.
Yes.
They had no idea who Aesop was. They literally only knew this guy who they thought he wrote, like they thought he came up with the original story.
Oh my
this
goodness.
guy literally Weird Al Yankovic his way into these children's homes.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Well, I hope that you feel that you are now like more informed, that when you can be like, oh yeah, Versailles. Yeah. Yes, I know all about it.
I will.
I hope you enjoy reading The Three Musketeers.
Thank you so much.
And that you can stick it to that French husband of yours once in a while. Thanks for having me in your bed.
Yay, thanks for coming.
Well, that was the second best time I've ever had in bed with a guest. But that's only because I've recorded with my husband a couple of times. Oh, thanks again to Kristal Adams and her husband Fabrice for having me. Please follow her and go listen to her comedy album, Ain't I a Wombat, available now on YouTube. It's hysterical. As for us, we have a new HILF episode every other Wednesday, and next time I am joined by actor, writer, and puppeteer Andy Kraft for the HILFing of the Donner Party. Oh yeah, the tragic tale of the westward wagon train that descended into madness and cannibalism over a winter stuck in the Sierra Nevadas. Ooh, it is a perfect companion as you travel over the holidays. In the meantime, our theme song was composed and performed by Kat Perkins. A reminder that you can find my sources, links to the books, documentaries, and articles I reference in the summary of this episode, or by emailing us, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or messaging us on social media @hilfpodcast. This has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party, and everybody's coming.